Infrastructure Expo Conference 2025. Up next, we have panel discussion 2, Driving Healthcare Growth through Strategic Investment and Sustainable Infrastructure Development. On the stage, moderator of this panel will be Dr. Vishal Gandhi, founder and CEO, BIORx Venture Advisors. Please give him a big round of applause, everyone. Arshita Kapoor, Vice President, Quadria Capital. Please welcome them on the stage, everyone. Mayur Sirdesai, Managing Partner, Somerset Indus Capital Partners. Dr. Rajiv Chibbar, Vice President, Sahajanand Medical Technology. Now let's start with the panel discussion 2.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for your presence. And without doing much of a formality, I want to thank Medgate for this opportunity. And I can only share that, today's panel is actually full of synergies, right? And the topic also reflects about strategic investment. So I have Rajiv here with me, who represents a company, one of the leading med technology company called SMT, and I'm sure he's going to talk more about that. Then on my other side is, Arshita. Arshita represents private equity fund, and then we have Somerset, represented by Mayur, represents a venture capital fund. So I think from a healthcare continuum perspective, if you look at, we have a person like Rajiv talking about medical technologies. I represent BIORx, banking, and of course angel investing experience. Then we have very good private equity fund called Quadria, which has supported many hospital initiatives, medical technology companies, and of course Mayur. So I think from the quorum perspective, we are pretty good. The way we have thought that we will handle it, we will reflect on the topic. Topic is driving healthcare through strategic investment. I think the topic is very, very heavy, and but we will try to make it very light for all of you. So I would like my panel to first briefly introduce themselves, right? And then, of course, you can also reflect on this topic of strategic investment, how these strategic investments are catalytic to the growth of healthcare industry in general, from the private sector lens. So I will let Rajiv, being an industry representative, to start. Rajiv, over to you.
Thanks, Vishal. Thank you very much. And thanks, Medgate and Afzal Bhai, for this great show. I think when we talk of investments, it's very critical that whether it's a hospital, whether it's a healthcare facility, or even if it's a medtech company like ours, the purpose remains same when we look at investments. It's largely to drive innovation. It's largely to improve the access of care that we're looking at. And then ultimately, we're trying to create economic opportunities. I think it's a great topic. We would be able to look at not only how devices or pharmaceuticals can become one of the key areas which, while planning infrastructure, can actually look at it. And when we were having an offline conversation, 40 to 45% of a hospital's infrastructure is largely dedicated to the devices, whether it's in a cath lab, whether it's in oncology labs and others, even your newer setups that they're looking at. So I think investment in that sense is a very important thing.
Actually, there is a line item called medical equipment planning.
Yes.
And that actually speaks about the opportunity, that exists when you think about organic setup, a hospital or a brownfield or a greenfield, and that how medical technology planning becomes so important, because 40 to 50% of your total capex requirement is around medical technologies, right?
Absolutely.
So there is so much, when you think about hospital setup, you have to actually think about medical technologies on the same day.
Yeah. Even in Ayushman Bharat, if you look at it, and when we're looking at, 2018-19, when Ayushman Bharat was started, within 1.5 years, there were only 300 odd setups. But the thing that Ayushman Bharat grappled with was, the infrastructure delay which actually happened, and that was because they did not envision so much of investment that went into equipments, that went into maybe OTs, that went into medical devices, securing of all of these things. So I think planning and investment from that perspective is a very, very important thing. Today, even a hospital that comes up, maybe it's a 20-bedded hospital or a 200-bedded hospital, the first thing on their line item and sub item is medtech and medical devices, and how would they look at it?
Absolutely. So, reflecting on my experience from healthcare finance perspective, it's about 20 plus years experience. The first time I heard about Max Hospital getting an investment from IFC, and I think that really set me thinking that, what is the role of World Bank in actually promoting private infrastructure in the country? And today we see somewhere, the genesis of all the hospitals financing, has come from either ADB or IFC. But then we've also seen how private players, have also taken this opportunity forward to think that healthcare as a, investment vehicle. And I think a lot of development has happened primarily because private equity funds and VC funds actually back the right founders. And one of the companies that I'm very, very, happy about, of course, I've not really had a chance to work with them, but I really know all the founders very well, is Ujala Signals. And we're very privileged to have, Mayur today to talk about his experience, when thinking about hospital financing, especially in a tier 2, was like, should we be investing in tier 2 when there's enough opportunity in tier 1? And how Mayur probably gave them the first check. I think those 4 founders, created something very new, and I as a banker was evaluating them. And I wasn't very confident, but I'm sure he had a brave heart and he ended up putting money, and I'm sure we all know rest is history and how he made money. But I think it's not about how he made money, but how he created an impact. And we are very, very proud, Mayur, that you have flown from Bombay to share your wonderful experience. So why don't you tell us what made you sign a check to Ujala Signals, and we all know what Ujala is, where it is today. And why don't you share your whatever experience you would like to share to sort of encourage the fellow entrepreneurs sitting here.
Thanks, Vishal. So I represent Somerset Indus Capital Partners. We are a fund which basically focuses on the lower tier markets in healthcare in India. So we do things across healthcare, pharma, medtech, hospitals, diagnostics, primary care, nutrition, all that space. But I think 15 years ago when we started this fund, me and my co-founder basically decided to bet on the lower tier markets. We believed that there was a real significant demand-supply gap. But that demand-supply gap was something not to say that we don't want to do a business there. I think we felt that there is an opportunity to build strong businesses, create strong social impact, but also generate good returns. And it required a very different mindset. I think that is what we sort of betted, and that's why we don't do control transactions, we do minority transactions, but we basically find promoters who understand these markets and are ready to roll up their sleeves and go into these markets and build up. And like Vishal said, Ujala Signals was probably our first bet in the hospital space, and we did that in 2013. That time, Tier 2 was something which wasn't even known. We also didn't know really how we'll navigate. What we saw was a good group of promoters who said, we want to build this, and we supported them. I think it was a real learning experience. I mean, like Vishal said, we went through the whole gamut of, building a hospital chain, nearly losing it because the market wasn't building up, and then sort of coming back, building it back up and making it one of the most successful Tier 2 chains in North India. Today, we started from 3 hospitals, 2 in Delhi, 1 in Panipat, and the whole idea was to build on GT Road and build out. And I think we did that, but once Ujala came on board, etc., we went into all these things. So today, we have a whole range of hospitals across North India. And that is basically Delhi, Haryana, UP, Uttarakhand, Now we just bought Amandeep in Punjab. We have Jammu Kashmir. I think we've covered a large chunk of the whole North Indian market where there was a real gap in the market. And you really didn't know how to work. So the question was, I always say it's a very flipped model to what you see in the metro tier 1. So there you say you have a shortage of beds in India. In the lower tier, I have shortage of beds, but even if I put beds, I have affordability issues. I will never be able to fill up a hospital just because I put up a hospital. The critical part becomes how are you going to make sure that you can make affordability available. And that is where it's just not a self-pay market, it's a market with schemes in it. Insurance has still not penetrated deeply in it, but I think it's going there. And I think what we realized is that we have to learn to work in that market with different payer mechanisms. And I think Ayushman was a big game changer. But like you've heard, Ayushman, the rates are low, so how do you make money? The critical part is not just understanding what payers you're going to work with, but I think it's understanding how to work with volumes, but understanding cost structures. I think all that really makes you make a model which is profitable, but it is extremely different from what you will see a Max or a Fortis play out. I think that is what really helped build us. But today when you go into the market, so we look at across the country, and today the market is very different. I have seen hospitals recently in South India, tier 3, tier 4 towns, extremely good hospitals, only doing cash pay out of it. I've seen hospitals in West Bengal which do a fair bit of cash, a fair bit of insurance, Ayushman and all that is probably 25%. So demographics are changing. Doctor availability is changing. I think you're seeing more and more doctors available in the lower tier towns. You're seeing more medical colleges coming in, and that does make a difference in these towns. So I think there is a significant shift in terms of how the tier 2 model builds. But I think today it is clear that you can build profitable tier 2 hospitals which create social impact. So Cygnus for us was a 10-year story, but we've got another hospital in Rajasthan called Apex. We built that in 5 years to really build it to scale. We've got Sterling hospitals in Gujarat. Again, that's something which we are building to scale much faster. So now the ability to work the regular private equity model, saying 5-6 years of staying in a investment, actually plays out in lower tier. But the model is different. I think the critical part to understand is you are not doing the cookie cutter traditional metro tier 1 model. You're doing something different in these towns, and I think that really counts.
Absolutely. Rajiv, I think you wanted to add on Ayushman.
Yeah, so one point on Ayushman Bharat is what I completely agree. When we look at the low costs that they associate with, and courtesy that entire population that they're trying to catapult into, that is something which, while private sector does not look into a costing basically. That investment is something which goes into the hindsight of investment, which actually makes the investment not lucrative enough. Today, if you look at even the most developed countries, and I won't go to US or maybe England, let me take it to Germany, France, the Nordic countries, or even down to Vietnam and Thailand. They have this entire system which actually plows back into what you've invested. So that investment is basically based on the technological acumen that you've actually brought to the table, rather than the investment just being that, okay, I'll come up with maybe 20 MRIs and something which could actually fill a hospital space. So, this is something which policy makers need to really understand from a private perspective also. So that's where, this Ayushman misnomer sometimes is a deterrent to hospitals, and it should be. I mean, in the morning when we were listening to the inaugural session, sir talked about a hospital being made on a sand dune in Rajasthan, and I've actually witnessed that. I mean, courtesy, my dad was also posted in Barmer, and we were looking at a camp in Jalipa. They were actually looking at creating a hospital in almost 240 days. So, at that point of time, all this was not a consideration and the PPP mode was not a consideration. So I think investments from now, from then to now, criticality of investments has really grown not only to innovation but also to the entire service quotient.
Absolutely. I think we are in an era, maybe next year we will be discussing about AI hospitals. I think China has announced that they have the first AI hospital. But I think India challenges are very different. But I'm sure we will see the digitization as Mayur talked about. And there are hospitals which I'm aware of that there's no paper in the hospital, which is so amazing, you know. And so Arshita, coming to you, Mayur did support multi-specialty hospital in a very niche format, tier 2, tier 3. But you did support tier 1 hospital in a single specialty. And I'm sure there's so much to learn from your experience of supporting companies in the gastroenterology, eye care. So do you think that these opportunities are still very exciting for the next decade? And if they are, then what are the best learnings that you've had? And how do you think that, we can emulate those learnings and come up with a better ROI models around the hospital infrastructure that we're planning to have a setup now?
First of all, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the panel. I represent Quadria Capital. We are India and Southeast Asia healthcare-focused private equity fund. We invest across the value chain of healthcare, as Mayur was mentioning as well. So be it pharma, medtech, hospitals, anything and everything which is healthcare is what we invest in. Our typical check sizes are slightly larger since we are late stage private equity. So we do anything between $75 to $300 million check sizes. Maybe taking a step back and looking at the overall macro perspective would be helpful. I think India right now has the largest population in the world. We have more than 400 million people suffering from chronic diseases. So there's a significant disease burden that we have currently. But there is a substantial shortage in the supply side. So there is estimated to be about 2.4 million bed deficit in India that we see today. So there's a very, very important demand-supply gap which makes healthcare a very interesting sector for private equity. I think in the last year itself, overall private equity investments in India were close to $40 billion. And out of that, $6 billion came into healthcare. So healthcare is the core focus of many, many private equity funds today. And we only see that growing as we move forward. From our perspective at Quadria, when we look at healthcare, we want to identify opportunities which are at the center of having deep, meaningful social impact, as well as being able to give financial returns. So we believe these two are not mutually exclusive. These are actually mutually reinforcing. So once you are able to get into a sustainable infrastructure development, it will actually get into a virtuous cycle where your returns eventually improve. So in the past, we've invested in Asian Institute of Gastroenterology. We were one of the first ones to get into single specialty as a theme of investment. What worked out very well for us was the high clinical quality. I think that's one thing that we always look for when we are doing our investment checks in terms of ensuring that the clinical quality is always best in class. So AIG, as an example, was selected as one of the top 20 centers of excellence by the World Endoscopy Organization, and they also had a partnership with the Mayo Clinic. So that is fundamental for us to ensure that clinical quality, there is no compromise. Apart from that, I think single specialty...
So that's the strategic value that you are able to bring in for your portfolio companies in terms of academic and clinical excellence. Great.
Absolutely. And when AIG was looking to expand and add another hospital, we helped them add an 800-bed hospital next to their existing one and move away just from gastroenterology to inculcate 5 more centers of excellence from a specialty perspective. Given we have a network in Southeast Asia as well with hospital investments in Indonesia and Vietnam, we were able to set up partnerships between AIG and these hospitals to ensure there is cross-pollination of ideas and global best practices get implemented at AIG. I think from a single specialty perspective, what private equity finds very attractive is the ability to scale up. and the ability to generate returns from a capital efficiency perspective. So that's something that we have seen across our single specialty investments, be it AIG, be it Maxivision, which is in the eye care space,
And Nephroplus also,
and
right?
Nephroplus. So both Maxivision and Nephroplus, actually 60% of their centers are in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, not really so much in tier 1. So despite that, I think the economics have worked out well for us given the small size of the center.
Nephroplus would be daycare procedures, right?
Yes.
Largely.
Nephroplus has about 450 centers throughout India and 3 other countries.
Very nice. Good. So, coming to you, Rajiv. Rajiv, we have seen that, sustainable healthcare infrastructure, right? People are talking about ESG goals now. So, while you are very manufacturing heavy, so what kind of sustainable healthcare practices that you're able to incorporate, very easily, and what you think is very difficult to incorporate? Maybe your thoughts on that.
So at SMT, we're largely, a white certificate device, which means that we largely do not end up affluents at all. But yes, I think we followed in all our factories, whether these are the two facilities in Surat or Hyderabad or Thailand, in Galway, Ireland, and now in Brazil. What we're following is, obviously a global pathway where we can make sustainability more impactful to whatever manufacturing we are doing. Large part of that is also the supply chains. So right from the building, in fact, I am also operating, or the operations head for Hyderabad as well as Thailand, and we built this facility right from scratch. We looked at various certifications that we could look at, and one of the certifications that was very, very close to the Indian traditions or Bharatiya Paddhati ke hisab se was the Griha certification, the Green Rated Integrated Habitat Assessment System. So today, that 20-acre facility in Hyderabad, just as an example, which we have, we've not only ensured the regular compliance of the putting green, but even architecturally, if you look at it, anything that can offset your power and water consumption was looked into, whether it was looking at renewables or even it was looking at replenishing the groundwater. Fortunately, in Hyderabad, we have almost like 4.5 months of good rain and showers that happened. The groundwater was actually replenished by almost 9.5 feet, which is, for a hilly terrain of that sort, in the last 7 odd years, 9.5 feet of replenishment of groundwater was huge. Then we looked at air conditioning. So the traditional air conditionings that we have was only limited to a few areas where we could not have earth air tunnels. Now this was very important for us because, below the earth, the concept that we looked at it, and it was very traditional concept. Below the earth, if you go down almost like 22 feet, the temperature is completely constant. So we had these 7 tunnels dug into the entire facility, and these tunnels then plow the air which is down there, which is approximately around 22 degrees or so. In a facility, that is what you want. You don't want it to be too chilly that you're actually having blankets or asking others to wear a full suit, and that too in a state like Hyderabad. So that's something that we looked at. It offsetted almost 71% of our air conditioning load, which is huge on your, an annual saving, if I could look at, was almost around 4.77 CR. So that 4.77 CR, we then again plowed back into the, the clean air system that we needed in our clean rooms, because we were expanding into structural heart and all that. The clean rooms HEPA filtration center, which was required to offset all of that, we took over we actually created this entire guy to come over from Germany and look at how HEPA filtration could be of low efficiency while the HEPA filtration still has the same 1000 or 1 lakh filtration facility or standardization that was there. Again, in that it was 43% efficiency achieved. So that was there. Again, the fly ash part that you look at, it was very traditional again. The fly ash we used entirely in the outer body of the facility, which keeps almost the entire 20-acre facility, out of which I think it's 4.5 lakh square feet that is built. 4.5 degrees down, even when we have it at the peak of 45 degrees. So looking at that, I think an annual plowback of around 10 crores, if you envision, is a great thing. And then AQI. You have 3 shifts going on. Your air quality monitoring and AQI became another, Achilles heel for us. So we kind of like worked on to it. So I think these are 10 crores is big. For us, it is also big. But if you plow back that 10 crore very systematically, you can actually achieve more and more and more over the years. Even for water, if you look at it, I think right now we use only 2.2 cubic something of water, which actually before this facility was there, we got just I think एक नल का प्रावधान था, उससे ज़्यादा कुछ था भी नहीं. So that's also very efficient that we're looking at, and the other aesthetics around environment, sustainability have all been met.
So I think bottom line is sustainability is not a compliance measure, but it is also a good business decision. And we do a lot of due diligences on behalf of investors. So one of the things that Mayur, I would like to ask you, when you look at a hospital project or any, for that matter, medical device project, like at early stage, how do you ensure that, evaluation of a sustainability, from a long-term horizon perspective, are there clear metrics that you look for? And is it easy to figure it out, or it is actually not so easy to figure it out whether they will be having a sustainable, advantage and a sustainable infrastructure aspect related to probably not from today, but from next 5 years perspective, 10 years perspective, because your investment horizon is not today, but between 5 to 7 years. So what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think all our investments basically have to sort of have an ESG focus on it. So it's not something which we can sort of wish away. I think we are a ESG governed fund, and we have very strong ESG policies which not just allow us to function that way, but also our portfolio companies need to do that. So as part of the whole investing process, right from the initial screener, when we look at a company, we look at ESG and sustainability. The key is you carry it through in a diligence, you decide, what are the gaps, you then sort of look at how to fill those gaps up, and then sort of throughout the whole investment process, you keep monitoring that. And yes, more and more things sort of come up to sort of improve upon. But I think that is a inbuilt process in any investment. So whether it is environmental, social, governance, all these factors do play a role. Environment in a healthcare space probably is a little bit easier to handle because it's a highly regulated industry. So you will still see a lot more compliance than a lot of other industries. But on the social side, on governance issues, policy making, all that is where you be focused. I think promoters understand that. Why are promoters coming to us? That's why they're doing it. They want to build an organized play. They want to change and differentiate themselves in a market which is competitive, right? So these things do make the difference. So what we support them is organization building. What we support them is how do you operate at scale. And in that whole process, all these sort of factors do play a role. So I think it is, for most funds now, it is an inbuilt process which is there because, not just because it is a tick mark, but it actually helps the business differentiator in the marketplace. That's what it is.
Absolutely. So in your experience, how many deals you would have actually said no, it made financial sense, but it just didn't make compliance sense because you felt that maybe your exit will be compromised and you wouldn't want to then commit it. So how often do you see such scenarios?
So you do see, I'm not saying that you don't, but if you see a deal that's early to flag off, I think a lot of it is dependent on meeting with the promoters and seeing what their thought process is. If their thought process is not to get into that, it's easy to see that upfront. And then it's not, I mean, we are not here to change the promoter's thought process. We are sort of support him in his build-up.
That's a very difficult one.
So it's you catch this early on. I don't think, you can screen out a lot of them, but they are fairly early. I doubt it whether you will go through an entire diligence process and then say, oh, now I'm going to get it. It's too late by the time. So I think it's a matter of understanding what you're getting into. And I think, especially being from sort of a sector-focused this thing, I mean, like Quadria and us, I think you can smell these things out fairly early. That's what it is.
Absolutely. So Arshita, I think we have heard from Mayur. Okay, you have a hard stop? Okay. So if anybody has any question from Mayur because he has a hard stop, so please feel free to ask. Anybody has any question from Mayur? I think we are good. All right, thank you. Yeah. Great having you here. Ritika, Mayur is leaving, so can we do a felicitation for him? Yeah. Arshita, since you support much more mature businesses, right, in the healthcare, the ESG metrics is quite sorted out, right? And so how do you really help them to improve overall ESG metrics from when you enter? They score maybe 5 out of 10, but then eventually when you are looking for planning an exit, the day you invest, you also think about exit. So how do you really work with them to improve the overall ESG score? If any inputs from you will be very helpful.
Sure. So I think very similar philosophy as what Mayur had mentioned. For us, we have internally developed our proprietary impact management and measurement framework based on which we give scores across 4 pillars. So we look at access, whether the investment will help increase access to healthcare. We look at affordability, will it make healthcare more affordable? Awareness, will it improve awareness for diseases? And quality, what is the level of quality that this investment will help support for healthcare. So across these 4 pillars, we have multiple sub-metrics. We give scores and weightages to each of them, come to a score at the time of investment, and when we are doing the investment, we come to a score what is expected at the time of exit. So while we are still in the investment phase, we create a plan with the company in terms of what are the areas where we can support them to help improve the score from say X to a Y when it comes to exit. So this is something which is very important for us. I think from a healthcare perspective, we look at doing some of these external validations also, like EcoVadis is one agency which does an ESG rating for pharma companies and healthcare companies, and that's something we do every year for our companies as well. This year actually one of our companies was rated platinum by EcoVadis, which is the highest rating possible. It was one of the top 1% in the world. So I think for us, ESG becomes extremely important. At the time of investment, we do a very thorough ESG diligence. We identify all the gaps which are there with the company and have a plan that within the next say 6, 9, 12 months, how will those gaps be addressed? So very clear plan at the beginning and clear alignment with the management.
Sure. So in your experience, is there a correlation between ESG and the patient safety? Right? Have you seen that? Do they work diametrically opposite, or there is a convergence?
No, there's definitely a convergence. I think from a hospital standpoint, biomedical waste management, fire safety are extremely important issues. And those are issues we treat as the key ones for our diligence. So any gaps in that becomes a big red flag. So first of all, that becomes maybe not investable for us. But if we decide to go ahead, it's very important to bridge that gap because we don't want to compromise on patient safety. So very relevant and important that these two factors are.
Absolutely. And the last question to you for now is, when you look at investment, what are the core 3-4 things that are like must, not compromised, and they must be check-boxed?
I think given we are talking about ESG, definitely ESG is one.
Yes.
So our ESG score at the beginning, there is a certain minimum threshold below which we cannot invest. While as Mayur was saying, we typically know whether the company will reach that score or not. So we don't want to spend a lot of time in evaluating a company which will eventually not reach that threshold. So very quickly we are able to figure out if the company has the right fundamentals in place from an ESG perspective. I think the second most important thing is the quality of the team, both the promoter and the management team that he's built below him. Because we also don't want over-reliance on a single person. There has to be an institutionalization and a very high standard of governance that we look at. So those two for us become very critical. Apart from that, usual private equity criteria in terms of having a large market, the business quality being good. From a hospital perspective, that could be in the form of revenue mix being diversified, the payer mix being diversified, cost efficiencies being in place, and their ability to improve their margins. Scalability is again an important criteria for us. And lastly, I would say capital efficiency. How well are they able to use the capital that they've invested, both in terms of return on assets, return on capital employed, return on equity. So again, those metrics, financial metrics, again important, apart from the ESG and promoter aspects that we talked about.
Great. Thank you for sharing those insights. So, Rajiv, coming to you, we are reflecting on strategic investment. And you as a company have had various rounds of funding that, in medical technology. And I think we were in our era. Again, I would reflect back probably 17 years ago, there were hardly any medtech companies that when I was at Yes Bank, we could have thought of investing. And my boss left and he invested in Trivatron. And he says, this is one of the biggest companies that we could think of investing in a medical technology. But today, I think fortunately, the scenario is transformed, right? Now we have many more companies which have actually raised decent amount of money, especially in the cardiovascular space. And I think you are one of the leading cardiovascular players. Now, from that matrix of 80% import, there was a time where there was so much of dependency, right? Now, India has actually sort of improved that, right? From 80 to, you were talking about 60. But yet, I think there is much more to be done. What are those three things that you expect government to be able to do to create this as 80-20, wherein 80% is import substituted and 20% is import? So what is required, three things from a government or from the industry to be able to reverse this? And nobody else other than you can talk about it.
No, I think it's great when we think of 80-20 from a domestic point of view, but I think even the most powerful countries like US have still around 44 to 48% dependence on imports. So we need not 2047, I think we need 3047 vision for 80-20 in that sense. But yes, I think something when we look at not only imports or domestic prowess to be built up, I think the acronym SMART needs to be really imbibed from both sides. When I say both sides, it's the government as well as the private sector, where, S would actually stand for sustainable. Because what we've looked at, earlier S was specific, but that was a business specifics. Here we're talking at like sustainable. M should be measurable. If it is measurable, then we would be able to be, talking about the 80-20 that you're thinking of, which can be achievable. Then, your R needs to be relevant enough. So if it's not relevant, and I talk about relevant not only in terms of sustainability, in terms of the 1.5 climate change agenda that globally we have, but also relevant in terms of how your, the end user, which is the patient, would look at it in terms of a long-term this thing. And the T is tech savvy. If we're not using AI, if we're not using technology, God forbid, even 40-47 would not be the right era. So I think this SMART needs to be imbibed from both the government side as well as the private sector, and this then needs to converge into a PPP mode and not the public-private partnership mode, but largely a partnership for a public purpose that will actually help yield much more investments globally?
Absolutely. I think India needs its own standards. India needs its own policy because we are 1.4 billion people in the country. And I can tell you, we did a survey with a pharma company, and we actually got to know that there's a village just 200 kilometers from here. People have not even had their disprin in their lifetime. And we claim that we're the pharmacy of the world. And this speaks about the opportunity, that how much opportunity is still to be unlocked in pharma, medtech, hospital, all that. So I think with that note, maybe we could keep on going, but we need to close. And I couldn't have expected a better outcome coming from both of you. I think amazing insights I have learned, and I'm sure fellow entrepreneurs would have also learned a lot. So with that note, I think if anybody has any questions or comments or reflection, Dr. Bhatia, you've been patiently listening to us. He's been my teacher. I met him 20 years back when I was part of Dabur Research Foundation. So we incubated a company called OnQuest, and we could incubate OnQuest only because he allowed us to incubate. So people talk about incubation today, but Dr. Bhatia supported incubation for Dabur when I was a young researcher, and a lot of gratitude to you, sir. It's always pleasure to see you, and you continue to be really driving the healthcare agenda forward, and we are really learning from you, sir. Any reflections from you or any motivation that you would like to share? We have, sir, why don't you talk about standards? Yeah. Sir, you would like to talk about your roles of standards in healthcare. I think quality in healthcare is important, and I think if we don't talk about quality, I think we'll not be finishing the panel right.
I have a slightly controversial stand on quality in healthcare. I think it's been, there was a wonderful initiative in my own organization called NABH. There's no doubt about that. But I think it has driven the conversation away from minimum standards for quality which are needed. It's impossible that 1 lakh hospitals in India will get NABH accreditation in any near future. 40, 47, 30, 47, whatever you were talking about. So I am an advocate of minimum standards being notified under Clinical Establishment Act and being enforced first before we go on to claiming anything else as far as healthcare services are concerned. My take on products is different because there we are global. I am a great advocate of adopting international standards. He's aware on that. But on the services side, I'm sorry, the conversation is too much on accreditation at the expense of mass healthcare, which will not be accredited in the near future. So that's how
I think other aspect of scaling up business is dealing with medical legal issues, and we are very happy to have Dr. Shah. Very few people really know what medical legal issues are, and I think Dr. Shah has been exemplary. So great to see you, sir. Thank you so much for your presence. Yeah. Are we good? Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you, panel, for the insightful session. May I now request Dr. Y.P. Bhatia and Dr. Rajesh C. Shah to facilitate the panel. We have Dr. Rajiv Chibber, Vice President, Shahjahan Medical Technology. Mayur Sirdesai, Managing Partner, Arshita Kapoor, Vice President, Quadria Capital. Dr. Vishal Gandhi, founder and CEO, BIORx Venture Advisors. It's time for a group photo now. I request everyone to be seated, please. Thank you, panel, for the insightful session.